The first gunshot echoed across Blackridge Hollow at 4:47 a.m. Caleb Hale was already awake. He'd been awake for hours, sitting in the dark cabin with black coffee going cold between his palms, watching the tree line through a window that hadn't been cleaned in months. Sleep was a luxury he'd stopped affording himself somewhere around the second anniversary of Sarah's death. The shot came from the eastern ridge. Too close, too clean. Not the panicked blast of a weekend hunter stumbling through unfamiliar territory. This was practiced. Professional. He was out the door before the echo faded. The November air bit through his flannel like broken glass. Frost crunched under his boots as he moved through the pines, rifle slung across his back, more from habit than expectation. He'd stopped hunting 2 years ago. Stopped most things, really. The mountain had become less a home and more a waiting room, a place to exist while the rest of the world moved forward without him. But something about that shot felt wrong. The tracks appeared 50 yards from his northern trapline, fresh boot prints pressed deep into semi-frozen mud. 2 sets. Maybe 3. They moved with purpose, cutting straight through terrain that should have slowed anyone who didn't know the land. Caleb crouched, studying the prints. Military tread. Recent. Still sharp at the edges where ice hadn't fully formed. His trapline had been destroyed. Not tripped. Destroyed. Someone had taken wire cutters to every snare within a 100-yard stretch, leaving coiled metal scattered like discarded thoughts. The precision bothered him more than the act itself. This wasn't vandalism. It was a message. He followed the trail higher. 20 minutes of hard climbing brought him to the clearing where he found the elk. What was left of it? The animal had been gutted with surgical efficiency. Organs removed, choice cuts harvested, the rest abandoned to rot. But it was the head that stopped him cold. Severed clean at the neck. Gone. Trophy kill. Caleb had seen poaching before. Hell, he'd worked game enforcement for 6 years before everything fell apart. But this was different. Poachers took what they needed and ran. This was theater, statement killing. His hand drifted to the rifle without thinking. Blood trail led east, deeper into the mountain spine where the old logging roads cut through territory most people forgot existed. He'd hiked these ridges 1,000 times with Sarah, back when the world still made sense, back when he could sleep without seeing her face in every shadow. The trail split at Widow's Creek. 2 sets of tracks peeled off toward the main road. One continued higher, into the granite maze where the mountain turned hostile and mean. Caleb hesitated, something cold sliding down his spine that had nothing to do with temperature. Then he heard the engine. Diesel. Heavy. Moving fast on the old fire access road that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The Forest Service had gated it off 3 years back after the budget cuts. Caleb pushed through deadfall and emerged onto the ridgeline just in time to see the truck disappear around the bend. A dark Chevy Silverado with mud-caked plates and a covered bed. Moving like the driver knew exactly where every pothole and washout waited. Local. He watched until the dust settled, then turned back to the blood trail. That's when he found the second kill site. This one was worse. 3 deer, all bucks, all butchered with the same cold precision. Heads gone. Organs scattered, and carved into the bark of a nearby aspen, still bleeding sap, a symbol that made Caleb's breath catch in his throat. He knew that mark. Had seen it once before, 3 years ago, scratched into the dirt beside Sarah's truck the day they found her body wrapped around a tree on Highway 14. The official report called it an accident. Icy roads, excessive speed, tragic loss. Caleb had never believed it. Sarah had been researching illegal hunting operations for a documentary she was producing, tracking a network of trophy killers who paid premium money for off-season kills in protected territory. She'd gotten close to something. Too close. 2 days before she died, she'd called him from somewhere on the mountain, voice tight with excitement and fear. "I found it, Caleb, the whole operation. I know where they're staging." He'd been in Denver for a training seminar, stuck in a hotel conference room learning updated protocols he'd never use. "Found what?" "Sarah, slow down. I can't, not on the phone. But I've got proof, names, routes, everything." "Then come down. We'll take it to the feds together." Silence on the line, just wind and static. "Sarah? I love you. You know that, right?" "Of course I know that. What's going on? If something happens, nothing's going to happen. If it does, don't let them bury it. Promise me." He'd promised. 48 hours later, she was dead. The investigation lasted 6 days. Closed case, accidental death. They'd found her camera equipment in the wreckage. Every memory card erased clean. Her laptop destroyed. Notes gone. Convenient. Caleb had pushed, demanded answers, called in every favor he had from his law enforcement days. But the case stayed closed, and the questions piled up like snow until they buried everything except the ache. So he'd walked away from the job, from the town, from every piece of life that reminded him of what he'd lost. Bought this land on the edge of Black Ridge Hollow with what was left of their savings and tried to disappear into the quiet. 3 years of silence, until this morning. He photographed the symbol with his phone, hands steadier than they should have been. Then he followed the trail higher, into territory that turned the forest dark and close. The old logging road appeared like a scar, overgrown but still visible, cutting through terrain the maps claimed didn't have road access. Fresh tire tracks marked the path. Recent use. Heavy vehicles. Caleb moved carefully now, every sense dialed up. A quarter-mile in, he found the staging area. It was hidden in a natural depression, invisible from the main trails, accessible only by the forgotten logging route. Someone had set up a semi-permanent camp, canvas tents, portable generators, a refrigerated trailer marked with a commercial meat processing logo that he knew for certain didn't operate anywhere near Black Ridge County. Empty now, but recently used. Recently, he checked the trailer first, locked, but through the gaps in the door seal, he could see hanging racks and drain grates, industrial setup. This wasn't weekend poachers, this was organized. The tents yielded more. Sleeping bags, propane heaters, scattered gear that spoke of multiple occupants rotating through. And in the corner of the largest tent, hidden under a tarp, he found the heads. 14 of them. Elk, deer, mountain lion, even a black bear. All trophy quality. All fresh enough that the smell hadn't turned yet. Caleb's stomach twisted. This was a hunting operation, all right. But not for meat, for money. Rich clients paying for illegal kills they could mount on walls and brag about at cocktail parties. And Sarah had found it. He was photographing the evidence when he heard the vehicles. Multiple engines. Coming fast. Caleb killed the trailer and moved, slipping into the tree line just as 3 trucks rolled into the clearing. The same Silverado from earlier, plus a white F250 and a black Suburban with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. 6 men climbed out, armed. 2 carried rifles like they knew how to use them. The others had sidearms visible on their hips. Caleb pressed himself against a boulder, watching. Tire tracks all over the access road, one of them was saying. Tall guy, maybe 40, with a face that looked comfortable giving orders. Someone's been up here. Could be hikers, another offered. Younger. Nervous energy. In November. On a gated road? The tall one shook his head. Run the perimeter. I want to know who, and I want to know now. They fanned out with practiced efficiency. Caleb waited until they'd moved past his position, then started backing deeper into the forest. He'd gotten 20 yards when his boot came down on a dead branch. The crack echoed like a second gunshot. Everything stopped. There. Boot steps crashed through underbrush. Caleb ran. The terrain worked in his favor. He knew every stone, every drop, every game trail that cut through the impossible sections. But they were younger, faster, and motivated. A bullet punched bark off a tree to his left. Just trying to scare him, someone shouted. Boss wants him alive if possible. Caleb didn't waste breath responding. He cut hard right, using the granite outcrop to break line of sight, then dropped into the ravine that most people didn't know existed. 40-foot slide down loose scree and exposed roots, coming out in the creek bed where water ran fast and cold enough to kill the scent trail. He moved downstream, staying low, listening for pursuit. It came, but slower now, cautious. Lost him in the ravine, a voice echoed from above. Want us to keep going? Pause. Then, no, pull back. We've got his face on the trail camera. We'll find out who he is. Caleb's blood went cold. Trail camera. He'd missed it. They had him. He waited until the voices faded, then climbed out of the ravine on the south side, miles from where he'd gone in. The hike back to his cabin took 2 hours of hard movement, every step spent calculating how badly he'd just screwed up. They knew someone had found the operation. They'd have his photo by now, probably already running it through whatever databases they had access to. And in a county this small, with his law enforcement background, it wouldn't take long to connect the dots. Caleb Hale, widower, ex-game warden, living alone on the eastern edge of Black Ridge Hollow. He reached the cabin as the sun started its descent behind the ridge. The coffee from this morning sat on the table, surface frozen solid. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it, except for the truck parked in his driveway. Sheriff's Department. Black Ridge County seal on the door. Deputy Marshal Wade leaned against the hood, smoking a cigarette that he flicked away when Caleb emerged from the tree line. "Caleb!" Wade's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man who'd practiced delivering bad news. "Didn't expect to see you up and about this early. Could say the same about you, Marcus." "Got a call. Reported gunshots on the eastern ridge. Hunter, probably. Season's still open for another week." "That's what I figured." Wade's eyes tracked across Caleb's mud-stained pants, the scratches on his hands. "You hear anything unusual this morning?" "I hear gunshots every morning this time of year." "Right." Wade nodded slowly. "Thing is, we also got a report of someone trespassing on private land up past Widow's Creek. Property owner's pretty upset about it." "Didn't know that land was private. Thought it was Forest Service." "Was. Got purchased about 8 months ago. Mineral rights deal, mostly. But the new owner's been real particular about keeping people out." "Who's the owner?" Wade's expression flickered, just for a second, but Caleb caught it. "Corporate purchase. Shell company out of Denver. You know how it is? Money people buying up land for tax breaks." "Yeah, I know how it is." They stood in silence for a moment, the November wind cutting between them. "Look, Caleb," Wade's voice dropped. "Whatever you think you saw up there, I didn't say I saw anything. You should probably forget about it. These property owners, they're connected. They don't like complications." "That a warning, Marcus?" "That's advice. From a friend." "Didn't know we were friends." Wade flinched. "We used to be, before, He stopped. "I'm just saying, sometimes it's better to let things go, especially up here. The mountain has a way of settling its own scores." Caleb felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest. "Is that what happened to Sarah? The mountain settling a score?" "Jesus, Caleb, that was an accident." "Yeah, that's what the report said." Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed off the truck, moving toward the driver's door. "Stay off that property, Caleb. I mean it. Next time I get called up here, it won't be friendly." He drove away, leaving Caleb standing in the driveway with more questions than answers and the taste of something rotten in his mouth. Inside the cabin, he pulled up the photos on his phone. The symbol carved into the tree, the staging area, the trailer full of trophy kills. Then he opened his laptop, the one he'd stopped using for anything except checking weather, and started searching. The shell company that owned the land traced back to 3 other LLCs, each one nested inside the next like Russian dolls. But at the center, buried under layers of legal paperwork and deliberate obfuscation, he found a name: Cade Enterprises. Victor Cade. The name meant nothing to him. But Google had opinions. Real estate developer, political donor, board member on half a dozen conservation nonprofits. The kind of irony that would be funny if it wasn't so perfectly designed as cover. Net worth somewhere north of 40 million. Properties across 3 states. And a hunting lodge outside Black Ridge that catered to exclusive clients seeking authentic wilderness experiences. Caleb clicked through to the lodge's website. Glossy photos of smiling rich people holding rifles. Testimonials about once-in-a-lifetime trophies and unforgettable hunts. All legal. All sanctioned. Except for the operation running on the mountain. The one Sarah had found. The one that got her killed. He spent the next 6 hours going through every file Sarah had left behind, boxes of notes and hard drives he'd been too broken to touch until now. Most of it was corrupted or incomplete, but buried in a folder labeled Weather Archive 2020, he found it. Voice memos. Dozens of them. Sarah's voice filled the cabin, steady and determined, recording her findings like she always did. November 4th. Confirmed sighting of illegal processing site. Location matches anonymous tip. Vehicle description. Black Suburban, Colorado plates. November 9th. Tracked supply deliveries to the lodge. 3 trucks. After hours. No manifests. November 12th. Client list. I've got names now. including 2 state senators and a federal judge. November 14th, they know I'm watching. Found my trail camera destroyed. Need to move fast. The recording stopped on November 15th. She died on November 16th. Caleb played the last memo 3 times, her voice washing over him like cold water. If you're hearing this, something went wrong. I've hidden the evidence. Safe place. Only you would know where. Find it, Caleb. Finish this. Don't let them bury the truth the way they'll try to bury me. The recording ended. Caleb sat in the dark cabin, the weight of 3 years pressing down like stone. He'd made her a promise. Time to keep it. Outside, the mountain waited in silence, holding secrets it had kept too long. And somewhere in that darkness, men who thought they were untouchable were about to learn that some debts don't disappear. They just come due. The safe place turned out to be exactly where Caleb should have looked first. Their old hunting blind, 15 miles into the backcountry, perched on a ridge that overlooked the valley where they'd scattered her mother's ashes 5 years ago. He hadn't been back since the funeral. Couldn't stomach it. The hike took him most of the night. He moved without a flashlight, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness, using the stars to navigate terrain that memory filled in better than any map. Every step felt like walking backward through time, past the creek where Sarah had fallen through ice one winter, past the meadow where they'd seen that wolf pack at dawn, past the lightning-struck pine where he'd asked her to marry him. The blind was still standing, barely. Weather had taken its toll, canvas rotted through in places, support poles leaning at angles that wouldn't hold much longer. But the floor was intact, and when Caleb lifted the corner board they'd always used to hide their gear, he found it. A waterproof case, military grade, sealed tight. Inside, 3 USB drives, a leather journal, and a handwritten note on paper that had started to yellow. You found it. I knew you would. Finish this, Caleb. Make them pay. I love you. Always. S. His hand shook as he pocketed the drives and opened the journal. Sarah's handwriting covered every page. Names, dates, license plates, client lists with amounts that made his stomach turn. $50,000 for an off-season elk, $75,000 for a trophy bear, $120,000 for a mountain lion kill with guaranteed shot setup. And woven through it all, one name kept appearing. Victor Cade. She'd been tracking him for 8 months before she died, following money trails through shell companies, documenting meetings between Cade and local officials, photographing deliveries to the hunting lodge that didn't match any legal manifests. The last entry was dated November 15th, written in handwriting that looked rushed, almost frantic. Confirmed, Sheriff Davis is on the payroll. Deputy Wade brought in 3 months ago. Can't trust local law enforcement. Federal contact established. Meeting set for November 18th in Denver. Agent confirms this goes higher than I thought. State politicians involved. Maybe federal. Need to get evidence out before... It stopped mid-sentence. Caleb read it twice, then snapped the journal shut and climbed down from the blind. Dawn was breaking over the eastern ridge, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold that Sarah would have stopped to photograph. He didn't stop. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun was full up and his phone had 6 missed calls, all from the same Denver number. He didn't recognize it. The phone rang again as he stepped through the door. This time he answered. Mr. Hale? A woman's voice. Professional, careful. My name is Agent Rachel Chen, FBI. I need to speak with you about your wife's research. Caleb went still. How did you get this number? From her files. She listed you as her emergency contact for the investigation she was assisting us with. I understand this might come as a shock. Nothing about Sarah shocks me anymore. Pause on the line. Mr. Hale, I'm going to be direct with you. Your wife was working with our field office on a case involving illegal wildlife trafficking and political corruption. We were scheduled to meet with her on November 18th, 3 years ago. She never showed up. She died 2 days before your meeting. I know, and I'm sorry. We looked into the accident, but local law enforcement was already compromised. Another pause. Longer this time. You know, I'm starting to. Mr. Hale, if you have access to any of your wife's research, any evidence she might have collected, I need you to bring it in immediately. This case is still active, and who killed her? We don't have definitive proof that her death was anything other than who killed her. Chen Sai crackled through the speaker. Off the record, we believe her vehicle was tampered with. Brake lines, steering column. made to look like weather-related loss of control. But we can't prove it without evidence, and every piece of physical documentation disappeared within hours of her death. Victor Cade. Silence. Mr. Hale, I can't confirm or deny. I found her files. All of them. And this morning I found the staging site she documented. The whole operation is still running. Jesus Christ. Chen's professional tone cracked. You need to get out of there. Now! If they know you found the site, they know. Then you're in immediate danger. I'm sending a team. How long? 6 hours. Maybe 5 if we push it. But you need to stay hidden until... I'll meet you at the Black Ridge Sheriff's Station. Noon tomorrow. Mr. Hale, that's not safe. The sheriff is compromised. I know. That's why I'm meeting you there. Public. Witnesses. They can't disappear me in front of the whole town. They've done it before. Not to me, they haven't. He hung up before she could argue. The next call came 10 minutes later. Local number this time. Black Ridge area code. Mr. Hale. A man's voice. Older. Uncertain. This is Father Tom Weaver from St. Michael's. I'm sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you might have time to stop by the rectory today. There's something I need to discuss with you. About Sarah. Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. What about her? Not over the phone. Please. It's important. Father, I'm not really in a church-going mood these days. I understand, but this isn't about faith, Mr. Hale. It's about confession. The word hung in the air between them. Whose confession? I'll explain when you get here. Please, before it's too late. The line went dead. Caleb stood in his kitchen, looking at the journal and USB drives spread across the table, and made a decision that would have terrified the man he used to be. The scared version of himself died with Sarah. What was left didn't scare easy. He loaded the Glock he'd kept in the safe, checked the magazine twice, and headed for town. St. Michael's sat on the edge of Black Ridge's historic district, a small stone building that had been serving the community since the mining days. Father Weaver met him at the side door, a thin man in his 60s with gray hair and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. Thank you for coming. Weaver locked the door behind them. I wasn't sure you would. You said this was about Sarah, in a way. Weaver led him through the dim hallway toward his office. 3 weeks ago, a man came to me for confession. He was dying, cancer, had maybe a month left, and he needed to unburden himself before the end. I'm not interested in deathbed conversions, Father. Neither am I, usually. But what he told me... Weaver stopped outside the office door. I've been bound by the seal of confession for 30 years, never broken it once. But he gave me permission, told me if anything happened to him before he could make it right, I should tell you, specifically, you. Who is he? James Carver. He worked for the county road department, maintenance supervisor. The name meant nothing to Caleb. Weaver opened the office door. Inside, a manila envelope sat on the desk. The night your wife died, Mr. Carver was working late, routine winter prep on Highway 14. He saw a truck pulled off near mile marker 47, right around the bend where Sarah's accident occurred. 2 men, working underneath a vehicle. Caleb's blood went cold. He didn't think much of it at first, figured it was mechanical trouble, but then he recognized one of the men, Deputy Marcus Wade. Son of a bitch. Mr. Carver drove past. Didn't stop. Didn't report it. He told himself it was nothing, just a deputy helping someone with car trouble. Weaver's voice dropped. Then, 6 hours later, your wife's truck went off that same stretch of road. He knew. He knew, and he said nothing. He was afraid. Wade came to see him 2 days after the accident. Made it clear that if Mr. Carver remembered seeing anything that night, it would be unfortunate for his family. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. Mr. Carver has 3 grandchildren. He made a choice, a cowardly choice perhaps, but I don't care about his reasons. No, I don't imagine you do. Weaver picked up the envelope. But he spent 3 years living with that choice, and when the cancer diagnosis came, he realized he couldn't take it to his grave. So he wrote it all down. Dates, times, descriptions, everything he saw that night, and he gave it to me. Where's he now? Dead. 2 weeks ago. Hospice care at County General. Weaver's expression darkened. But here's the thing, Mr. Hale. The death certificate says natural causes, expected progression of his illness. You don't believe that. I visited him the day before he died. He was weak, yes, but stable. The hospice nurse said he had at least another week, maybe two. Then suddenly, overnight, he takes a turn and Weaver spread his hands. Gone. They killed him. I can't prove that. But the nurse who was on duty that night, she quit the next morning, left town, won't return my calls. Caleb took the envelope. Inside were 3 handwritten pages, shaky but legible, detailing exactly what James Carver had seen on November 16th. Times matched up. Vehicle descriptions matched Wade's personal truck. And at the bottom, a single line that made everything clear. I watched them murder her, and I did nothing. May God forgive me, because I never will. There's more, Weaver said quietly. Mr. Carver wasn't the only one who came to me. Over the past 3 years, I've had 4 other parishioners mention things. Strange things. Trucks running at odd hours on the old logging roads. Hearing gunshots in closed seasons. Seeing people who don't live here coming and going from the Cade Hunting Lodge. Why didn't you report it? To who? The sheriff? The deputies? Half this town works for Cade in some capacity. The lodge employs 70 people. The land deals bring tax revenue, development projects, donations to local charities. Weaver's voice turned bitter. Victor Cade owns Blackridge, Mr. Hale. Not officially, but in every way that matters. Then why tell me? Because you're the only person in this county who has nothing left to lose. And because Sarah deserved better than the silence we gave her. Caleb folded the pages carefully and slid them back into the envelope. You said 4 others came to you. Who were they? Weaver hesitated. I can't or won't. One of them is dead. Car accident 6 months ago. Another moved away. The other 2 are still here, but they're terrified. They have families, jobs, lives they're trying to protect. And Sarah didn't? The words came out harder than Caleb intended, but he didn't take them back. Weaver flinched. You're right. I'm sorry. We all failed her. We failed you. Yeah, you did. Caleb turned toward the door. Mr. Hale. Weaver's voice stopped him. Whatever you're planning to do, be careful. Cade has resources. Connections that go far beyond this county. Men like that don't just roll over when challenged. Good. I'm serious. You're walking into something that's gotten people killed. People like my wife? Yes. Caleb met the old man's eyes. Then I guess we're even. He left through the side door and drove across town to the Blackridge Gazette, the weekly newspaper that had been documenting local affairs since 1889. The office was a narrow storefront wedged between a hardware store and a coffee shop that smelled like burned beans. Inside, a young woman sat behind a desk buried in papers, typing furiously on a laptop that looked older than she was. She glanced up when Caleb entered. Help you? Looking for back issues, November 2020. Physical or digital? Both, if you've got them. She studied him for a moment, then shrugged. Archive room's in the back. Help yourself. Digital's all on microfilm, though. Scanner's broken, so you'll have to read it old school. The archive room was exactly what it sounded like. A dusty closet stuffed with bound volumes and metal filing cabinets. Caleb found the November 2020 editions and spread them across a table that wobbled on uneven legs. The accident coverage was front page. Small town tragedy. Well-liked documentary filmmaker. Survived by her husband. Services at St. Michael's. In lieu of flowers, donations to the county wildlife fund. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But tucked in the back of that same edition, a tiny column about local business news caught his eye. Cade Enterprises announces expansion. New wildlife management contract with Forest Service. The contract gave Cade's company exclusive rights to manage hunting permits and wildlife monitoring across 3,000 acres of federal land. Land that included the entire eastern ridge of Blackridge Hollow. The contract was dated November 20th, 2020, 4 days after Sarah died. Caleb photographed the article, then kept digging. Over the next 2 hours, he traced a pattern. Every 6 months, like clockwork, Cade Enterprises acquired more land, more contracts, more influence, and every acquisition coincided with someone leaving town or shutting up about something they'd seen. The young woman from the front desk appeared in the doorway. Find what you needed? Getting there. You're Caleb Hale, aren't you? He looked up. She was younger than he'd first thought, mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back, eyes that held more intelligence than her casual tone suggested. Do I know you? Not really, but I knew Sarah, sort of. She stepped into the room, lowering her voice. I was interning at the university when she was putting together her documentary. She interviewed me about local environmental issues. Small world. Smaller than you think. She glanced toward the door, then back at Caleb. Look, I don't know what you're researching, but if it has anything to do with Cade, be careful. Second person today to tell me that. Then maybe you should listen. You got a reason I should? She was quiet for a moment, then, my name's Lena Cross. I'm a wildlife researcher. Or I was, until I made the mistake of documenting illegal kill sites on protected land. Caleb went still. When? 2 months ago. I was tracking elk migration patterns for my thesis. Found a butchering site that shouldn't exist, reported it to the Forest Service. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess who holds the wildlife management contract? Cade. Bingo. My report disappeared. My advisor suddenly decided my research wasn't up to standards, and I started getting followed. By who? Don't know. Different vehicles, different people, but always there, parking outside my apartment, sitting in coffee shops where I work, never approaching, just watching. You go to the police? Sheriff Davis told me I was being paranoid, suggested I take some time off. Relax. Her jaw tightened. So I quit my program and took a job here, figuring a public position would keep me safer. Turns out the Gazette's biggest advertiser is Cade Enterprises. Jesus. Yeah. Lena crossed her arms. Whatever you're digging into, Mr. Hale, it's bigger than some illegal hunting. This is organized, protected, and the people running it don't leave loose ends. Sarah was a loose end. Lena's expression softened. I heard about the accident. I'm sorry. It wasn't an accident. I know. The words hung between them. Caleb gathered the articles he'd photographed. You still have your research? The documentation you filed? Copies, yeah, not that they've done me any good. I might be able to change that. FBI's opening an investigation. They need evidence. Lena's eyes widened. The FBI? Agent out of Denver. She's been working this case since Sarah died, but she needs proof. Physical documentation. Witnesses willing to testify. That's a good way to end up dead. Probably. And you're doing it anyway. Don't have much choice. Lena studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. I'm sending you the files, everything I documented. GPS coordinates, photographs, field notes. It's all there. This could put a target on you. Newsflash, I already have one. At least this way it might actually mean something. Her phone chimed. There, sent. Caleb's phone buzzed with the incoming files. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, just make sure it counts. He left the Gazette office as afternoon shadows started stretching across Main Street. The town looked peaceful, normal. Pickup trucks parked outside the diner, kids walking home from school, old men sitting on benches outside the feed store. A town that had learned to look the other way. His truck was parked 2 blocks down. He'd made it halfway there when the black Suburban pulled up alongside him. The rear window rolled down. Mr. Hale. The voice was smooth, cultured, the kind that belonged to boardrooms and country clubs. I think we should talk. Caleb stopped. The man inside was maybe 60, well-dressed in the careful way that screamed money without flashing it. Silver hair, tanned skin, eyes like chips of ice. Victor Cade. Get in, Cade said. It wasn't a request. I'm good here. I'm afraid I must insist. 2 men climbed out of the front seats. Big guys. Professionals. Not making threats, just making presence known. Caleb glanced around. The street was empty now. Nobody on the benches, the school kids gone, like the town itself had decided to disappear. He got in the Suburban. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Cade sat on the far side of the back seat, perfectly relaxed, one arm stretched along the headrest. I apologize for the dramatic approach, Cade said as the vehicle started moving, but you've been difficult to reach through conventional channels. Maybe I don't want to be reached. Understandable. You've had a difficult few years. Losing your wife like that, tragic, truly. Caleb's hands clenched in his lap. I'm told you've been asking questions, Cade continued, poking around in places that don't concern you, making certain people nervous. Good. Cade smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You misunderstand the situation, Mr. Hale. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to help. Help? Yes. You see, I understand grief, loss, the desperate need to find meaning in tragedy, to assign blame when sometimes there is none. My wife was murdered. Your wife had an accident, terrible timing, icy roads. It happens every winter in these mountains. Her brake lines were cut. By who? The local mechanic who inspected her vehicle 3 weeks before she died and found them perfectly functional? The insurance investigator who found no evidence of tampering? Cade's tone stayed calm, reasonable. I know you want someone to blame, Mr. Hale, but sometimes the universe is simply cruel. Cut the performance. I know about the hunting operation, the staging site, the clients paying for illegal kills. Cade was quiet for a moment, then he sighed. I run a legitimate hunting lodge. All permits filed. All kills legal and documented. What happens on other people's property is not my concern. The property you own through shell companies. I own many properties. Real estate is an excellent investment. And it's convenient when you need places to hide criminal activity. Careful, Mr. Hale. Slander is a serious accusation. The Suburban turned onto a dirt road Caleb didn't recognize. Trees closed in on both sides, blocking out the fading daylight. Where are we going? Somewhere we can speak privately. Cade leaned forward slightly. You have something that belongs to me. Files, research, evidence that could be misinterpreted in unfortunate ways. Sarah's files. Your late wife was investigating claims that turned out to be baseless. She died before she could learn that. But the documentation she compiled, taken out of context, it could damage legitimate business operations. I'd like it back. Not a chance. Mr. Hale, I'm offering you a way out. A generous way. $500,000 for everything your wife collected. Enough to start over somewhere new. Leave Black Ridge, leave Colorado. Build a life that doesn't revolve around chasing ghosts. You think I can be bought? Everyone can be bought. It's just a question of price. Then you don't know me very well. Cade's expression hardened. No, I don't. But I know you're alone. No family, no close friends. A man who spent 3 years hiding in the mountains because he couldn't handle the real world anymore. What do you think happens if you take this to the authorities? You'll be discredited, dismissed as a grieving widower who can't accept that his wife died in a simple accident. FBI doesn't seem to think it's that simple. Cade's eyes narrowed. You've contacted federal agents. Meeting them tomorrow at the sheriff's station, noon, public record. The silence in the Suburban was absolute. Then Cade smiled again. This time it looked genuine and terrifying. You've made a mistake, Mr. Hale. The vehicle stopped. They were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and darkness and nothing else. The two men from the front seat climbed out and opened Caleb's door. Get out, one of them said. Caleb looked at Cade. That's your play? Kill me and dump the body? Who said anything about killing you? Cade's voice stayed pleasant. You're going to walk away from here, drive home. And tomorrow morning, you're going to call that FBI agent and tell her you were mistaken. Emotional distress, seeing patterns that don't exist, whatever story you need to tell yourself. Or accidents happen, not to you, but to people you care about. That young researcher at the Gazette, for instance, Lena Cross, bright future ahead of her. Would be a shame if something... Caleb moved without thinking. He hit the first man in the throat with his elbow, collapsing the windpipe. The second one reached for a weapon. Caleb grabbed his wrist, twisted, and slammed the man's head into the door frame twice. Both men went down. Cade hadn't moved. He sat in the back seat, watching with something that might have been admiration. Impressive. I was told you had training, but... Caleb pulled the Glock from his waistband and pointed it at Cade's chest. Here's what's going to happen, Caleb said, his voice perfectly steady. You're going to call whoever you need to call and tell them to leave Lena Cross alone. Then you're going to sit here while I walk away. And tomorrow at noon, I'm meeting the FBI. With everything. Cade didn't look at the gun. He looked at Caleb's eyes. You won't shoot me. You sure about that? Completely. Because you're not a murderer, Mr. Hale. You're angry, grieving, desperate for justice. But you're not a killer. I was a soldier before I was a game warden. Iraq. 2 tours. So yeah, I can kill just fine when I need to. But you don't need to. Not yet. Cade's tone stayed calm. If you shoot me here, you become the criminal. Everything you've gathered becomes inadmissible, and Sarah's death stays buried forever. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Cade waited. The woods were silent except for the labored breathing of the 2 men on the ground. Then Caleb lowered the gun. Smart choice, Cade said. This isn't over. No, it's just beginning. Caleb backed away from the Suburban, keeping the weapon trained on Cade until he'd put 50 yards between them. Then he turned and ran. The forest swallowed him whole. Behind him, he heard Cade's voice calling through the darkness. You can't win this, Mr. Hale. But I admire the effort, truly. Caleb didn't answer. He just kept moving, using the stars to navigate back toward town, his heart hammering against his ribs, and Sarah's voice echoing in his memory. Finish this. He intended to. Caleb made it back to his truck just as full dark settled over Blackridge. His knuckles were scraped raw from the fight, and his shoulder throbbed where he'd hit the ground during his escape through the woods. The 2 men he'd dropped wouldn't stay down forever, and Cade's threat about Lena Cross kept looping through his mind like a bad song. He drove straight to the Gazette office. The lights were still on. Through the window, he could see Lena at her desk, hunched over her laptop with the kind of focus that meant she was either chasing a story or avoiding going home to an empty apartment. The door was locked. Caleb knocked hard enough to rattle the glass. Lena looked up, startled, then hurried over to let him in. What happened to your hands? Had a conversation with Victor Cade. Her face went pale. He knows you talked to me. Yeah. How bad? Bad enough that you need to leave town. Tonight. Lena backed away from the door, shaking her head. I can't just... I have a lease, a job, my research. Your research is what got you on his radar in the first place. Caleb followed her inside, lowering his voice even though the street outside was empty. Cade threatened you directly, used your name. He knows where you live, where you work. You stay here, you become leverage. Against you. Against the investigation. The FBI needs witnesses, living witnesses. Lena sank into her desk chair, running both hands through her hair. This is insane. I documented some illegal kill sites. That's it. I'm not some whistleblower trying to take down an empire. You are now. She looked up at him with eyes that were trying hard not to show fear and failing. Where am I supposed to go? Denver. Agent Chen's office. I'll give you her number. Tell her everything you told me, hand over your files, and let the feds put you somewhere safe until this blows over. And if it doesn't blow over? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. Lena stood up and started gathering items from her desk. Laptop, notebook, a coffee mug with a faded university logo. Her hands shook slightly as she shoved everything into a canvas messenger bag. I knew this job was temporary, she said, voice tight. Guess I just didn't realize how temporary. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choices. She pulled on her jacket and slung the bag over her shoulder. You meeting Chen tomorrow? Noon. Sheriff's station. That's either brave or stupid. Probably both. She almost smiled. Almost. You really think the FBI can touch Cade? Guy like that, with his money and connections? I think Sarah got close enough to scare him. That means he's not untouchable. Lena moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, your wife was one of the good ones. She actually cared about getting the story right, not just getting it first. The day she interviewed me, she spent 3 hours listening to me talk about migration patterns and habitat loss. Most journalists would have been out of there in 20 minutes. That sounds like her. She said something I've never forgotten. She said the most important stories are the ones people don't want told, because those are the ones that change things. Lena's voice cracked slightly. So yeah, I'll go to Denver. I'll talk to your FBI agent, and I'll make sure Sarah's story gets told right. Thank you. Just promise me you'll be careful tomorrow. Cade's not going to let you walk into that meeting without trying something. I'm counting on it. Lena left through the back door, moving quickly toward the parking lot where her old Honda sat under a broken streetlight. Caleb watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner, then pulled out his phone and called Agent Chen. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Hale? I was starting to worry. I've got a witness heading your way. Lena Cross, wildlife researcher. She's got documentation of illegal kill sites on Cade's property, and she's been threatened for reporting it. When did this happen? About 15 minutes ago. She should be in Denver by midnight. Jesus, what did you do? Had a conversation. With who? Victor Cade, face to face. Silence on the line. Then, are you out of your mind? That man is... I know what he is. I also know he's scared. He offered me $500,000 to disappear. And you said no. Obviously. Mr. Hale, you need to understand something. We've been building this case for 3 years, slowly, carefully, gathering evidence through legal channels so it holds up in court. What you're doing, confronting suspects, gathering witnesses without protection, putting yourself in the middle of an active investigation, you're jeopardizing everything. Sarah didn't have 3 years. Chen's sigh crackled through the speaker. I know, and I'm sorry, but if you get yourself killed before we can lock down testimony, her death stays unsolved. Is that what you want? What I want is for the people who murdered my wife to pay for it, however that happens. Then work with us, not against us. I am working with you. That's why I'm meeting you tomorrow at noon. That meeting's off. Too dangerous. We'll arrange a secure location. No. It stays public. Blackridge Sheriff's Station, middle of the day, witnesses everywhere. Cade can't make a move without exposing himself. He doesn't need to make a move personally. He has people for that. Good. Let them try. Another pause. You want them to come after you. I want them to make a mistake. And they will. Because Cade's been operating in the shadows for so long, he's forgotten what happens when someone drags him into the light. You sound like you're planning a war. I'm planning to finish what Sarah started. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Less agent, more human. My team will be there at 11:30. We'll set up surveillance outside the station, wire the meeting room, have plainclothes officers positioned throughout the building. But Mr. Hale, if shooting starts, we can't guarantee your safety. I've been getting shot at since I was 22. I'll manage. That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be. He hung up and drove home through darkness that felt thicker than it should. The cabin sat exactly as he'd left it, isolated, dark, surrounded by forests that whispered with night sounds. For 3 years, this place had been his refuge, his prison. Now it felt like a staging ground. Inside, he spread Sarah's journal and the USB drives across the kitchen table. The confession from James Carver. Lena's research files. Everything he'd gathered in the past 48 hours pointed to the same conclusion. Victor Cade had built an empire on blood and silence, and tomorrow that empire started crumbling. Caleb spent the next hour uploading copies of everything to a secure cloud server, then emailing the access codes to Agent Chen with instructions to release it all if he didn't check in by sundown tomorrow. Dead man's switch. Old soldier habit. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He opened the closet in the bedroom and pulled out the gear he'd stored there the day he decided to disappear. Tactical vest. Combat knife. The rifle he'd carried through Fallujah. All of it wrapped in plastic, preserved like artifacts from someone else's life. The man who'd owned this gear had believed in things. Country. Duty. The idea that good people could make a difference if they just fought hard enough. Then he'd come home and watch the system fail Sarah. Caleb ran his hand along the rifle stock, feeling the worn grip that fit his palm like it had never left. He didn't know if he was that man anymore, didn't know if he wanted to be. But tomorrow would answer that question. He cleaned the weapons methodically, checking actions and magazines with muscle memory that came back easier than it should. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's windows and carrying the scent of snow that wouldn't hold off much longer. His phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. You made your choice, so did I. No signature, didn't need one. Caleb set the phone down and went back to work. He slept for 3 hours, shallow and dreamless, then woke at 4 a.m. to find fresh snow falling outside. Not heavy, just enough to make the world quiet and white and deceptive. The kind of snow that hid tracks. He dressed in layers, thermal base, flannel, the tactical vest under a heavy jacket that concealed its outline. The Glock went in a shoulder holster, spare magazines in his pockets. He left the rifle. Too obvious. Too aggressive for what was supposed to be a simple meeting. Besides, if things went that wrong, a rifle wouldn't save him. The drive to Blackridge took 40 minutes through snow that kept getting heavier. The town was barely awake when he arrived. A few early risers grabbing coffee at the diner, a snowplow making its first pass down Main Street. The sheriff's station sat at the end of a side street, a squat brick building that had been ugly even when it was new. 2 patrol cars in the lot, lights on inside. Caleb parked across the street and waited. By 11, the snow had stopped. The parking lot had filled up with civilian vehicles, people coming in to renew licenses, file reports, handle whatever bureaucratic nonsense kept a small-town sheriff's office running. Good. More witnesses. At 11:15, he spotted the first FBI vehicle. Unmarked sedan, but the way it moved and parked gave it away. 2 agents inside, both wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. By 11:30, he'd counted 4 more Bureau vehicles positioned around the block. His phone rang. "Mr. Hale, this is Chen. We're in position. Are you ready?" "Yeah." "Remember, stay calm, answer questions honestly, and if anything feels wrong, get out. We'll have your back." "Understood." He crossed the street and walked into the sheriff's station at exactly 11:45. The front desk was manned by a clerk he didn't recognize. Middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain and the tired expression of someone who'd worked in government too long. "Help you?" "I'm here to meet with someone. Federal agent. Should be arriving soon." The clerk checked her computer. "Name?" "Caleb Hale." Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or warning. "Conference room's down the hall. Second door on the left. I'll send them back when they arrive." "Thanks." The conference room was exactly what he expected. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, a table surrounded by chairs that had seen better decades. Small window overlooking the parking lot. No cameras visible, but he knew they were there. He sat facing the door and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. At 12:05, the door opened. But it wasn't Agent Chen, but Guinan. Sheriff Davis filled the doorway, a thick man in his late 50s with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen enough to stop caring. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, elected and re-elected on a platform of keeping Blackridge safe and quiet. Turned out quiet was easier when you were on the payroll. "Caleb." Davis closed the door behind him. "Heard you were causing trouble." "Just waiting for a meeting." "Yeah, about that." Davis pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "Your FBI friend called. She's running late. Asked me to keep you company." "That's thoughtful." "Isn't it?" Davis leaned back, making the chair creak. "You know, I liked Sarah. She was a good person, smart, passionate about her work. It was a real tragedy what happened. It was murder. That's a serious accusation. I've got serious evidence." Davis was quiet for a moment, studying Caleb like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You think I'm dirty?" "I know you are." "Based on what? Conspiracy theories from a dead man who was high on morphine when he gave his so-called confession? Based on 3 years of watching you bury the truth." "I buried nothing. I investigated your wife's death thoroughly. Accident reconstruction, witness interviews, forensic analysis, everything pointed to driver error on icy roads. Her brake lines were cut. According to who? You? A grieving husband who can't accept that sometimes bad things just happen?" Davis shook his head. "I feel for you, Caleb. I really do. But you're chasing ghosts." "Then why are you here instead of Agent Chen?" Davis's expression hardened. "Because I'm trying to save your life, you stubborn son of a bitch. You're walking into something you don't understand. People far above my pay grade are involved. They have resources, patience, and no qualms about making problems disappear. Like Sarah. Sarah made her own choices. She knew the risks. And James Carver, he make his own choices too?" Something shifted in Davis's face, just for a second. Then it was gone. "Carver died of cancer, after giving a confession that implicated your deputy in tampering with Sarah's vehicle. Carver was dying and desperate to make peace with himself. He would have said anything. He gave specific details, times, locations, vehicle descriptions, none of which can be verified. Wade's truck matches the description. Half the trucks in this county match that description." Davis stood up. "Listen to me carefully. The meeting you're waiting for, it's not happening. Chen got pulled back to Denver, some bureaucratic thing. And even if she does show up eventually, she's got nothing. No case. No evidence that'll hold up in court. Just the paranoid rambling of a man who can't let go. You're lying. Am I? Then where is she? Davis checked his watch. 12:15. Meeting was supposed to start half an hour ago. Caleb's phone was in his pocket. He pulled it out and dialed Chen's number. It went straight to voicemail. Davis smiled. Cell service can be unreliable in the mountains, especially when someone knows which towers to interrupt. You can't stop this. I'm not stopping anything. I'm just giving you one last chance to walk away. Take the money Kate offered. Leave Colorado. Build a new life somewhere else. Because if you stay, if you keep pushing this, you won't like how it ends. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. The door opened. Deputy Wade stepped in, hand resting casually on his sidearm. Sheriff, we've got a situation outside. Davis didn't look away from Caleb. What kind of situation? Federal agents. 4 vehicles. They're asking about the meeting with Mr. Hale. Relief flooded through Caleb like cold water. Davis's jaw tightened. Tell them Mr. Hale is assisting with a local matter. We'll send him out when we're done. They say they're not leaving without him. Then they can wait. Wade hesitated. Sir, one of them's pretty insistent. Says if we don't produce Mr. Hale in the next 5 minutes, they're coming in with a warrant. Davis turned to Caleb. Last chance. Go to hell. Have it your way. Davis moved toward the door. Wade, escort Mr. Hale outside. Let the feds have him. We're done here. Wade stepped aside as Caleb stood and walked past both of them into the hallway. His heart was hammering, but he kept his expression neutral. The front lobby was tense. The clerk had disappeared. 2 more deputies stood near the entrance, both armed, both watching Caleb with expressions that could have meant anything. Outside, he could see the FBI vehicles through the glass doors, agents standing beside them, waiting. Caleb pushed through the doors into cold air that bit at his lungs. Agent Chen was walking toward him, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. 2 other agents flanked her, hands hovering near their weapons. Mr. Hale, sorry we're late, technical difficulties. I noticed. You okay? Better now. Chen glanced past him at the sheriff's station. They give you trouble? Nothing I couldn't handle. Good. Because we need to move fast. Get in the car. We'll debrief on the way to Denver. On the way, what about the meeting? Meeting's compromised. Someone tipped off Cade that we were coming. We need to get you somewhere secure while we process the evidence you've gathered. Caleb looked back at the station. Through the glass, he could see Davis and Wade watching. Waiting. They're just going to let me walk away? They don't have a choice. Not with federal agents as witnesses. Chen's voice dropped. But that protection ends the second we leave Black Ridge, so we need to move. Now. She was right. Caleb knew it. But something felt wrong. How did you know the meeting was compromised? Chen frowned. What do you mean? You said someone tipped off Cade. Who? How did you find out? We intercepted communications, standard surveillance. When? This morning. Why? Because Davis just told me you got pulled back to Denver, that the meeting was canceled. Chen's expression went cold. I never canceled, and I've been in Colorado since yesterday. They both turned to look at the station at the same time. Davis was gone. So was Wade. Get in the car, Chen said, voice tight. Right now. Caleb started moving. That's when the shooting started. The first shots came from the rooftop across the street. Precise, professional fire that punched through the FBI sedan's windshield and sent agents diving for cover. Chen grabbed Caleb's arm and pulled him behind a patrol car as more shots rang out. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Sniper, one of the agents yelled. Roof of the hardware store. Return fire erupted from the FBI positions. The sound was deafening in the small-town quiet. Caleb drew his Glock and stayed low, scanning for threats. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. Someone had known exactly when and where he'd be. We need to move, Chen was yelling into her radio. All units converge on our position. We have an active shooter and a high-value witness. High-value witness. That's what he'd become. More gunfire from a second position, the roof of the feed store. They were boxed in. One of the FBI agents went down, clutching his shoulder. Another dragged him behind cover. Can you drive? Chen shouted at Caleb. Yeah. Then get to that truck. She pointed at a civilian pickup parked at the curb. Keys are in it. Go. What about you? We'll cover you. Move. Caleb ran. Bullets chewed up the pavement behind him. He reached the truck, yanked the door open, and threw himself inside. The engine turned over on the first try. Chen and two other agents laid down covering fire as Caleb punched the accelerator. The truck fishtailed on the icy street, then found traction and shot forward. In the rearview mirror, he saw muzzle flashes and smoke, saw Chen taking cover behind the sedan, saw more sheriff's deputies pouring out of the station, weapons drawn. Whose side were they on? Caleb didn't wait to find out. He took the first corner too fast, felt the truck slide, corrected, and kept going. Behind him, sirens started wailing. Pursuit. The roads out of Blackridge were limited, 3 main routes, all easily blockable. Cade would know that, would have people positioned. So Caleb didn't take the main roads. He cut through the residential district, bouncing over curbs and through yards, scattering trash cans and decorative fencing. People stared from their porches. Someone shouted. He didn't stop. The edge of town came up fast. Caleb aimed the truck at the tree line where the old logging roads began, the same network he'd been hiking for 3 years. Roads most people didn't know existed. Roads the sheriff's department definitely didn't know. The truck crashed through brush and hit the first trail hard enough to rattle Caleb's teeth. Behind him, the pursuit vehicles were still coming, but they were hesitating. City cops and patrol cars weren't built for off-road pursuit. Caleb pushed deeper into the forest. The trail climbed, steep and rocky, testing the truck's suspension. Branches scraped the sides. The undercarriage slammed against stones that would have stopped a lighter vehicle. But this was a mountain truck, built for this. He drove for 20 minutes, following paths he'd memorized during countless solitary hikes. The pursuit fell away. Either they'd given up or gotten stuck. Didn't matter. They'd come at him another way. Caleb stopped at a ridge overlook where cell service flickered in and out. He tried Chen's number. It rang twice, then connected. Hale? Jesus Christ, where are you? In the mountains. You okay? We're fine. 2 agents wounded, but they'll live. What the hell was that? An ambush. Cade knew we were meeting. Yeah, no kidding. Someone leaked the location. We've got a mole in the department. Davis? Probably. Maybe Wade? Hell, maybe the whole sheriff's office. Chen's voice was tight with fury. We're pulling back to Denver to regroup. I need you to find somewhere safe and stay there until we can extract you properly. I'm not running. Hale, they just tried to kill me in front of federal agents in broad daylight. That's desperation. That means I'm close to something they can't afford to have exposed. Or it means they're willing to risk everything to shut you up. Either way, I'm not stopping. Then you're on your own. I can't protect you if you won't work with us. I never asked for protection. I asked for justice. Justice doesn't mean anything if you're dead. Caleb looked out at the mountains stretching in every direction. Somewhere out there, Sarah had died trying to expose the truth. Somewhere out there, men who thought they were untouchable were planning their next move. Tell me something, he said. You've been working this case for 3 years. Why hasn't Cade been arrested yet? Chen was silent for a moment. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. The evidence is circumstantial. We have documents, testimonies, financial records, but Cade's lawyers are better than ours. Every time we get close, something falls apart. Witnesses recant. Documents disappear. People leave town. Or die. Yeah. Or that. So what's the plan? Keep building a case until he dies of old age? The plan is to do this right. Buy the book. So it sticks. Your book got Sarah killed. And going rogue will get you killed. Is that what you would have wanted? The question hit harder than it should have. Caleb closed his eyes, seeing Sarah's face in his memory, remembering her laugh, her stubbornness, her absolute refusal to back down from a story she believed in. She would have wanted the truth to come out, whatever it took. Then help us get there the right way. I am helping, just not the way you want. He hung up before Chen could argue further. The truck had maybe a quarter tank of gas left, not enough to get to Denver, barely enough to get back to the cabin. But the cabin was a trap now. They'd be watching it. Caleb started the truck and drove higher into the mountains, toward a place he hadn't visited in years. A place Sarah had loved, the old fire lookout tower. It sat at the highest point of the ridge, abandoned since the Forest Service budget cuts. 3 stories of metal and wood that Sarah had used as a photography blind, climbing up at dawn to catch the light hitting the valley. Caleb reached it just as the sun started its descent. The tower was exactly as he remembered, weathered, leaning slightly, but still solid. He climbed to the top floor and found what he'd hoped for. An old footlocker Sarah had stashed with emergency supplies. Blankets, bottled water, first aid kit, even a burner phone still in its packaging. She'd always been prepared. Caleb set up position at the window that overlooked the valley. From here, he could see for miles, could see anyone coming long before they saw him. He activated the burner phone and sent a single message to Chen's number. Found something Sarah left behind, evidence she hid before she died. Will send location once I verify contents. It was a lie. But it was the kind of lie that would make Cade move. And when people moved in desperation, they made mistakes. Caleb settled in to wait, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of orange and red. Somewhere down there, men were planning, plotting, trying to figure out how to silence him without creating more problems. They'd come. And when they did, he'd be ready. Because the scared version of himself had died with Sarah. What was left was something colder, something patient, something that had spent 3 years learning every inch of this mountain while they'd gotten comfortable in their corruption. The wind picked up, rattling the tower's windows. Caleb checked his weapons one more time and smiled. Let them come. They came at 3 in the morning, exactly when Caleb expected. He'd been awake for hours, watching the valley through night vision binoculars he'd found in Sarah's emergency kit. She'd always been thorough like that, prepared for scenarios most people never considered. The vehicles approached without headlights, navigating the old logging roads with the confidence of people who'd scouted the route beforehand. 3 trucks, maybe 12 men total, based on how the suspensions sat. Professional operation. Caleb had spent the intervening hours setting up. Not elaborate traps. He didn't have the materials or time for that. Just simple obstacles designed to funnel them exactly where he wanted them. Fallen logs repositioned to block certain paths. Tripwires connected to empty cans filled with stones. Noisemakers, not weapons. He didn't need to kill them. He just needed to control the battlefield. The first truck stopped about half a mile from the tower. Caleb watched through the binoculars as men climbed out, all armed, all moving with tactical discipline. Ex-military, probably. The kind of contractors Cade could afford to hire. They split into 3 teams. 2 moved to flank the tower from opposite sides. The third approached directly, using the terrain for cover. Standard assault pattern. Caleb waited. The direct approach team reached the first tripwire. Someone's boot caught it, and cans clattered down the slope with a sound that echoed through the pre-dawn silence. The team froze. From his position in the tower, Caleb could hear their voices carrying on the still air. Contact? Negative, just rocks. Stay sharp, could be traps. They kept moving, slower now, more cautious. The flanking teams hit their tripwires simultaneously, one on the north approach, one on the south. More clattering, more confusion. Caleb smiled in the darkness. He'd positioned himself on the 3rd floor with clear sight lines to all 3 approaches. The Glock was loaded and ready, but he'd left the rifle at the cabin. Too much firepower sent the wrong message. This wasn't about killing anyone. This was about making a point. The direct team reached the base of the tower. Caleb could hear boots on metal as someone started climbing the external stairs. Slow, careful, expecting ambush at every turn. He let them get halfway up before he spoke. That's far enough. The footsteps stopped. A voice called up from below. Mr. Hale, we're not here to hurt you. Mr. Cade just wants to talk. He tried talking yesterday. Didn't work out. Yesterday was a misunderstanding. Things got out of hand. People got shot. FBI agents who had no business being here. This is a local matter. Caleb laughed, sharp and humorless. Local matter. Right. Like Sarah's murder was a local matter? Silence for a moment. Then, your wife had an accident. Nobody murdered her. Deputy Wade tampered with her vehicle. I've got a witness statement that puts him at the scene. A statement from a dead man who was high on painkillers. Worthless in court. Maybe, but it's enough to make people ask questions. And questions lead to investigations. Real ones, not the kind Sheriff Davis specializes in. More silence. Caleb could hear radio chatter from below. The team's repositioning. They were trying to figure out how to flush him without risking casualties. "Here's what's going to happen," the voice called up. "You're going to come down, peacefully, and we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Cade, clear up all these misunderstandings. Or we come up and get you. You could try. There are 12 of us, Mr. Hale, and one of you. I'm aware. But you're on my mountain now. I know every rock, every tree, every trail. You're just guessing. We've got thermal imaging, night vision, communications equipment. You've got, what, a handgun and some rattling cans? I've got 3 years of knowing this terrain better than I know my own face, and I've got nothing left to lose. How about you? You ready to die for Victor Cade's money?" That seemed to give them pause. Caleb pressed the advantage. "Think about it. You're contractors. This is just a job. But the second someone dies up here, this stops being about money and starts being about murder charges. Federal murder charges because you attacked a witness in a federal investigation. We're not attacking anyone. We're conducting a lawful citizen's arrest. On what grounds? Trespassing, destruction of property, making terroristic threats." Caleb almost laughed. "That's creative. Cade's lawyers earned their money. Come down, Mr. Hale. This doesn't have to get ugly. It's already ugly. Has been since you people killed Sarah." The radio chatter got more intense. Caleb could hear frustration creeping into their communications. They'd expected this to be simple. Show up with overwhelming force, grab one middle-aged widower, deliver him to Cade. Instead, they were stuck at the base of a tower, in the dark, on unfamiliar ground, arguing with someone who clearly didn't care about the odds. A different voice called up, older, more authority. "Hale, my name's Carson. I'm team lead. I'm going to be straight with you. We're not leaving without you, one way or another." "Then I guess we're going to be here a while." "We can wait. Sun comes up in 3 hours. Once we can see, your advantages disappear. By then, the FBI will have triangulated your position. Chen's probably tracking your vehicles right now. The FBI has no jurisdiction over a private security consultation." "That what you're calling this? Consultation? We were hired to provide protective services on private property. You're trespassing on that property. Everything we're doing is legal." Caleb checked his phone. No signal this high up, which meant they couldn't call for backup either. Double-edged sword. "Legal," he repeated. "Right. Just like the illegal hunting operation you're protecting. Just like the murder of my wife. All legal. I don't know anything about that." "Convenient." Carson was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, less aggressive, almost tired. "Look, I get it. You loved your wife. She died. You want someone to blame. But Mr. Cade is a legitimate businessman. Whatever you think he's done, you're wrong." "Am I? Then why are you here with 12 armed men in the middle of the night? Because you made threats against a prominent citizen, claimed to have evidence of crimes that don't exist, sent messages designed to provoke a response. Mission accomplished. This is your last chance. Come down. Talk to Cade. If you really have evidence, present it through proper channels." "Tried that. Someone shot up the proper channels this afternoon." "That wasn't us." "Sure it wasn't." More radio chatter. Caleb could hear the team leads conferring. They were running out of patience. He needed to move this to the next phase. "Tell you what," Caleb called down. "I'll make you a deal. You all go back to your trucks and drive away, and I'll forget I saw your faces." Carson laughed. "That's not how this works." "No? Then here's how it works. I've got your license plates photographed, your vehicle descriptions documented, GPS coordinates logged, all of it uploaded to a secure server that automatically sends everything to the FBI if I don't check in every 6 hours. Silence. "You kill me up here. You're all going down for it. Every single one of you. Is Cade's money worth a life sentence?" One of the other voices chimed in, younger, uncertain. "He's bluffing." "Am I? Check your phones. See if you've got signal up here." Pause. Then muttered curses as they realized the problem. "No signal means I couldn't have uploaded anything," Carson said. "No signal now. But I had 3 hours between sending that message and you arriving. Plenty of time to document everything and set it up." More conferring. The younger voice sounded agitated now. Carson spoke up again. "Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, you're still trapped. We control all the access roads. You come down or you starve." Plenty of game up here. I can last weeks. In November? With winter coming? I've survived worse. In Iraq, maybe. This isn't a war zone. Isn't it? The question hung in the cold air. Caleb could see dawn starting to lighten the eastern sky. The window for darkness was closing. Once full daylight hit, the equation changed. Time to shift tactics. Carson, he called down, I'm guessing you're former military. Marines probably, based on how you're running this op. Pause. Army. Ranger Battalion. Then you know what happens when you take casualties on a mission that shouldn't exist. When the brass starts asking questions about why American soldiers died protecting some rich guy's criminal enterprise. This isn't a military operation. No, it's worse. Because you don't have rules of engagement, don't have command backing you up, don't have anything except Cade's money. And money disappears real fast when federal prosecutors start seizing assets. You talk a lot for someone who's cornered. I'm not cornered. I'm exactly where I want to be. That was only partially true. Caleb's position was defensible but not sustainable. He had maybe 2 days of water, less food, and while he could theoretically hunt and forage, doing so would expose him. But they didn't need to know that. His phone buzzed. Impossible. There was no signal, except it wasn't a call or text. It was an alert from the automated system he'd set up, the one monitoring local emergency frequencies. Multiple 911 calls from Blackridge, reports of gunfire, federal agents requesting backup. Something was happening in town. Carson must have gotten similar information through his radio, because suddenly the tone of the chatter below changed. More urgent, concerned. We've got a situation, someone was saying. FBI just raided the lodge. They're pulling out files, computers, everything. Caleb's heart rate kicked up. Chen had moved. While Cade's people were up here chasing him, the FBI had hit his base of operations. Carson's voice cut through the radio noise. All teams, pull back to vehicles. New priority, protect the primary location. What about Hale? Leave him. We've got bigger problems. The boots on the stairs started retreating. Caleb watched through the binoculars as the teams consolidated and moved back toward their trucks with disciplined efficiency. They were leaving, but not because he'd won, because he'd stopped being the primary target. The trucks started up and rolled out, moving fast despite the rough terrain. Within minutes, they disappeared into the forest, leaving only tire tracks and disturbed snow. Caleb waited another 20 minutes to make sure it wasn't a trick, then climbed down from the tower. The sun was fully up now, painting the valley in shades of gold and white. Beautiful. Sarah would have loved it. He pulled out the burner phone and found a spot where signal flickered to life. 3 bars. Enough. Chen answered immediately. Hale, you alive? Barely. What happened? We hit Cade's hunting lodge at 0400. Simultaneous raids on his Denver offices and his property holdings. We've got warrants for everything. Financial records, client lists, communications. The whole operation is coming down. Cade? In custody. Arrested him personally at his home in Denver. He's lawyered up, obviously, but we've got enough to hold him. Caleb leaned against the tower, suddenly exhausted. It's over? Not even close. His lawyers are already filing motions, and we still need your testimony to tie everything together. What about Davis, Wade? Also in custody. State police took them this morning. They're already trying to cut deals. Let them talk. Oh, they will. Especially once they realize Cade's going to throw them under the bus to save himself. Chen paused. You did good, Hale. The message you sent about finding new evidence, it spooked Cade into making moves, moving money, calling people, making mistakes. We were able to track all of it. I didn't actually find new evidence. That was a bluff. I know, but it worked. Caleb looked out of the mountains, thinking about the past 3 days. The escalation, the violence, the near-death experiences. How long until this goes to trial? Months? Maybe a year? White-collar cases move slow, but we'll keep him locked up. No bail for murder charges. You charged him with Sarah's death? Among other things. We've got enough from Carver's confession and Wade's vehicle records to make a case. Won't be easy, but it's there. Caleb closed his eyes. She'd be glad it's finally happening. I think she'd be glad you survived. She left specific instructions, in her notes. Said if anything happened to her, we should make sure you didn't do anything stupid trying to avenge her. Little late for that. Chen laughed softly. Yeah, a little late. But you're still breathing, so I'd call it a win. What happens now? Now you come in. Give your statement. Turn over everything you've collected, and then you try to figure out what normal looks like. Normal. The word felt foreign. I don't know if I remember how. None of us do, but we figure it out anyway. They made arrangements for extraction. Chen would send a team to pick him up from the tower in 2 hours. Give him time to secure Sarah's emergency supplies and make sure nothing got left behind. After hanging up, Caleb sat on the tower steps and watched the sun climb higher. The valley was waking up. Birds calling, wind moving through the pines, the world continuing on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For 3 years, he'd been frozen in grief, stuck in the moment Sarah died, unable to move forward or back. The mountain had been his refuge and his prison. Now the bars were gone. He wasn't sure how to feel about that. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. You think this is over? It's not. I have resources you can't imagine, lawyers, connections, friends, in places that matter. This is a minor setback, nothing more. Cade, even from a jail cell, still trying to intimidate. Caleb typed back, try me. The response came immediately. I will. And when I'm free, and I will be free, you'll wish you'd taken my money and disappeared. Caleb stared at this message for a long moment. Then he forwarded it to Chen with a note. He's threatening a federal witness, might want to add that to the charges. Another text came through, different number. This one from Lena Cross. Saw the news, you okay? Alive. Good. Because I'm testifying. Chen says my documentation might be key evidence. Figured you should know. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just buy me a beer when this is over. You owe me that much for making me move to Denver on zero notice. Caleb smiled despite everything. Deal. The FBI team arrived exactly on schedule. 2 SUVs and 4 agents, all armed, all professional. They secured the area, then helped Caleb pack up Sarah's emergency supplies. One of the agents was young, maybe 25, with nervous energy and 2 new gear. This is incredible, he said, looking out from the tower. You held off 12 contractors from up here? Mostly just talked at them. Still, takes guts. Caleb shrugged. Takes motivation. The young agent's expression turned serious. I read about your wife, what happened to her. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They drove back to Blackridge in convoy, taking the main roads this time. The town looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less threatening. Just another mountain community trying to survive. The sheriff's station had FBI vehicles parked all over it now. Agents were carrying out boxes of files. Crime scene tape blocked off the front entrance. They drove past without stopping. The safe house turned out to be a motel outside Denver, the kind of place that catered to truckers and tourists who couldn't afford better. Chen met them in the parking lot. Room 12, we've got agents in the rooms on both sides. You need anything? Ask. How long am I here? Few days until we finish processing everything and get preliminary statements locked down. She handed him a folder. Media's already picking up the story. Rich developer arrested for illegal hunting and possible murder. It's going to get loud. Caleb flipped through the folder. News articles, social media posts. Photos of Cade being perp walked out of his mansion. He looks smaller than I remember. They always do once the handcuffs go on. Inside room 12, the decor was exactly what he expected. 2 beds with floral bedspreads. TV bolted to the wall. Bathroom with fixtures from the 80s. But it was warm and safe. And he was too tired to care about aesthetics. He collapsed onto the nearest bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling the adrenaline finally drain away. For 3 days, he'd been running on rage and coffee and the momentum of finally having a purpose. Now that it was over, or at least paused, the exhaustion hit like a physical weight. His phone rang. Chen. Turn on the TV, channel 9. He found the remote and clicked it on. Local news. A reporter standing outside Cade's hunting lodge. Developing story in Blackridge County, where FBI agents have arrested prominent real estate developer Victor Cade on charges including racketeering, illegal wildlife trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. According to sources, the investigation has been ongoing for 3 years and involves multiple government agencies. The scene cut to Agent Chen giving a press conference. We want to be clear that this investigation is far from over. We believe Mr. Cade operated an extensive illegal hunting operation that catered to wealthy clients seeking trophy kills in protected areas. We also have evidence suggesting he may be connected to the death of documentary filmmaker Sarah Hale in 2020. The reporter's voice came back. Sarah Hale was investigating illegal hunting practices when she died in what was ruled a single-vehicle accident. Her husband, Caleb Hale, has maintained for years that her death was not accidental. Today's arrests suggest he may have been right. Caleb turned off the TV. His phone was already ringing. Multiple calls. Messages piling up. People he hadn't talked to in 3 years suddenly reaching out. He ignored all of it. Instead, he opened his photos and found the folder he'd avoided looking at since Sarah died. Pictures of them together, hiking, laughing, living the life they'd built. The last photo was from the week before she died. They were standing at the summit of Black Ridge Peak, Sarah's face bright with joy, his arm around her shoulders. She'd set the timer on her camera, and they'd barely made it into frame before it clicked. "We look ridiculous," she'd said, reviewing the shot. "We look happy." "Same thing." Caleb traced his finger across the screen, remembering that day, the way the sun had felt on his face, the sound of her laugh, the absolute certainty that they had time. "I kept my promise," he said to the empty room. "It took too long, and I nearly got myself killed doing it. But I kept it." The room didn't answer. But somewhere, in a way he couldn't explain and wouldn't try to, it felt like maybe she'd heard him anyway. He set the phone down and closed his eyes. For the first time in 3 years, he fell asleep without seeing the wreckage, without hearing the sheriff's voice telling him there'd been an accident, without replaying every moment he could have changed if he'd just been there. He slept. And when he woke 6 hours later, the sun was setting and his phone was buzzing with a call from Chen. "We need you downtown. Cade's lawyers are pushing for bail. Judge wants to hear from you directly about the threat level." Caleb sat up, rubbing his face. "When?" "Court convenes in 2 hours. Can you be ready?" "Yeah." "Good. Because this is where it gets real. Once you testify, there's no going back. You become the star witness in a federal case. Everything you say will be picked apart by lawyers who make more in a day than most people make in a year." "I've been picked apart by worse." "Maybe, but this is different. This is public record, permanent." "Good. Let it be permanent." Chen was quiet for a moment. "You sure you're ready for this?" Caleb thought about the past 3 years, the isolation, the grief, the slow death of living without purpose. Then he thought about Sarah, about the courage it took to chase a story everyone told her to drop, about the determination she'd shown even when it became dangerous. "I'm ready." "Then get dressed. We leave in 30 minutes. The courthouse was downtown Denver, a massive stone building that looked like it had been there since Colorado became a state. News vans lined the street, reporters with cameras, protesters with signs that said everything from "Justice for Sarah" to "Leave Cade alone." Chen's team moved Caleb through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Someone shouted his name, cameras flashed, questions got yelled into the chaos. He kept his head down and didn't respond. Inside, the courthouse was all marble and wood paneling and the kind of quiet that only existed in government buildings. They took an elevator to the 3rd floor and entered a conference room where 2 assistant U.S. attorneys were waiting. "Mr. Hale, so thank you for coming on short notice. I'm Janet Rodriguez, and this is my colleague Thomas Park. We'll be prosecuting the case against Victor Cade." They spent the next hour going over his testimony. What he could say, what he couldn't, what questions to expect from Cade's lawyers. "They're going to come at you hard," Rodriguez warned. "Attack your credibility, suggest you're emotionally unstable, paint you as a grief-stricken husband who can't accept a simple accident. Let them try." "I'm serious, Mr. Hale. These lawyers are professionals. They'll make you look unreliable if you give them any opening." "Then I won't give them one." Park leaned forward. "The key is to stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't elaborate unless asked. And whatever you do, don't let them provoke you into an emotional response." "I understand." "Do you? Because if you lose your temper on the stand, it undermines everything we've built." Caleb met his eyes. "I spent 3 years keeping my temper while the people who killed my wife walked free. I think I can handle a few lawyers." Rodriguez and Park exchanged glances. "All right," Rodriguez said finally. "Let's go over the timeline one more time. They rehearsed for another 30 minutes, then Chen appeared in the doorway. Judge is ready, we're up. The courtroom was smaller than Caleb expected. Maybe 50 people in the gallery, most of them reporters or legal observers. At the defense table, Victor Cade sat flanked by 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than Caleb's truck. Cade looked different than he had in the Suburban. Smaller. Older. The expensive haircut and tailored suit couldn't hide the fact that he was just a man who'd gotten caught. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Cade smiled. Not a friendly smile. A promise. The judge entered. A woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. All rise. Everyone stood. Be seated. We're here for a bail hearing in the matter of United States versus Victor Cade. I've reviewed the charges and the government's motion to deny bail. I'm prepared to hear arguments. Counsel? Rodriguez stood. Your Honor, the government respectfully requests that Mr. Cade be held without bail pending trial. The charges include conspiracy to commit murder, and we have evidence suggesting the defendant has both the means and motivation to flee the country. One of Cade's lawyers, a tall man with perfect teeth and a voice like honey, stood up. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman with deep ties to this community. He's lived in Colorado for 30 years, owns multiple properties, employs hundreds of people. The suggestion that he would flee is frankly ridiculous. The suggestion that he orchestrated the murder of a journalist who was investigating his criminal enterprise is also ridiculous, Mr. Hammond. Yet, here we are. Hammond didn't miss a beat. The government's case is based entirely on circumstantial evidence and the unreliable testimony of witnesses with axes to grind. My client maintains his innocence and looks forward to his day in court, which is why we're having a bail hearing. Your Honor, if I may, the charges stem from allegations made by Mr. Caleb Hale, the widower of the deceased journalist. Mr. Hale has spent the past 3 years in isolation, reportedly suffering from severe depression and paranoid ideation. His testimony is not credible. Rodriguez stood back up. Your Honor, Mr. Hale is present and available to testify regarding the threat Mr. Cade poses. The judge looked at Caleb. Mr. Hale, approach the witness stand. Caleb stood and walked forward, very aware of every eye in the courtroom tracking his movement. The bailiff swore him in. Rodriguez started with the basics. Name, relationship to Sarah Hale, background in law enforcement. Then, Mr. Hale, have you had any direct contact with the defendant since your wife's death? Yes. 2 days ago, he had me picked up off the street in Blackridge and driven to a remote location where he threatened me. Murmurs from the gallery. Hammond was on his feet immediately. Objection! This is overruled. I'll allow it. Continue, Ms. Rodriguez. What did the defendant say to you? He offered me $500,000 to turn over my wife's research and leave Colorado. When I refused, he threatened to hurt people I care about if I didn't drop the investigation. Did he specify which people? Lena Cross, a researcher who witnessed illegal activities on his property. And how did you respond? I escaped from his men and contacted the FBI. Hammond stood again. Your Honor, there's no evidence this alleged conversation ever took place. It's the word of a grief-stricken, Mr. Hammond, you'll have your chance to cross-examine. Sit down. Hammond sat, but his expression said he was just getting started. Rodriguez continued for another 20 minutes, establishing timeline, documenting threats, building the case that Cade was dangerous. Then it was Hammond's turn. He approached Caleb with the careful smile of a predator who'd spotted weakness. Mr. Hale, you've had a difficult few years, haven't you? You could say that. Lost your wife, left your job, isolated yourself in the mountains. That's a lot of trauma. It is. Have you sought professional help, therapy, counseling? No? Why not? Didn't see the point. Because you were focused on your own investigation into your wife's death. Yes. An investigation that local law enforcement had already concluded. They ruled it an accident, correct? They got it wrong. Or you can't accept that sometimes terrible things happen for no reason. Caleb kept his voice level. My wife's brake lines were tampered with. That's not random chance. According to a witness who is dying of cancer and heavily medicated, a witness who conveniently can't be cross-examined because he's dead. His testimony is corroborated by physical evidence. What physical evidence? The vehicle was examined by certified mechanics who found no evidence of tampering. Mechanics who were paid by people on Cade's payroll. Hammond smiled wider. So everyone who disagrees with your theory is corrupt. The sheriff, the deputies, the mechanics, the insurance investigators. Everyone except you. Not everyone. Just the ones who had a reason to cover it up. And you determined their reasons based on what? Your professional expertise as a, what was your position again? Game warden? Law enforcement officer. Who specialized in checking hunting licenses, not investigating murders, not conducting forensic analyses, not building criminal cases. Caleb felt the anger starting to build, but kept it locked down. I know what I found. You found what you wanted to find. Because accepting that your wife died in an accident means her death was meaningless. But if it was murder, if there's a conspiracy, then you have a purpose, a mission, something to justify the past 3 years of your life. Objection. Rodriguez was standing. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Mr. Hammond. Ask questions. Hammond didn't break stride. Mr. Hale, isn't it true that you've threatened my client? No. You pointed a gun at him during your alleged conversation. He had 2 armed men try to force me out of his vehicle. I defended myself. With a weapon you carried illegally into a meeting. I carry legally under Colorado law. To a meeting where you claim my client threatened you, yet you were the one who drew a weapon. After his men put their hands on me. According to you, my client's version is quite different. I'm sure it is. Hammond's smile was razor sharp now. Mr. Hale, you've spent 3 years obsessed with proving your wife was murdered. You've harassed local officials, conducted illegal surveillance, made wild accusations against respected community members, and now you expect this court to believe that my client, a man with no criminal record, extensive charitable work, and deep community ties, is actually a murderer. I expect this court to look at the evidence. What evidence? Hearsay from dead witnesses? Paranoid theories about organized conspiracies? The fevered imagination of a man who can't let go? Caleb leaned forward slightly. The FBI has documentation of illegal hunting operations, financial records showing payments to corrupt officials, testimony from multiple witnesses, physical evidence from crime scenes. This isn't imagination. This is real. Real enough that it took 3 years for any charges to be filed? Real enough that local law enforcement found nothing wrong? Real enough that your client sent 12 armed men to kill me 2 nights ago? The courtroom went silent. Hammond recovered quickly. Alleged armed men. Alleged threat. You have a talent for allegations, Mr. Hale. I have GPS data, photographs, license plates. The FBI is tracking those vehicles right now. Convenient that all this evidence appeared right when you needed it. Convenient that your client's in custody right when his operation fell apart. Hammond's smile finally cracked. Your Honor, this witness is clearly biased and unreliable. The judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. Mr. Hammond, step back. She looked at Caleb for a long moment. Mr. Hale, you may step down. Caleb returned to his seat beside Chen. The judge shuffled papers, then looked up. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. The government has shown sufficient cause to believe that Mr. Cade poses a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. Cade's face went pale. His lawyers immediately started objecting, citing precedent and procedure. The judge cut them off. My decision is final. We're adjourned. She stood and left the courtroom. Cade was led away in handcuffs, his expensive lawyers trailing behind, making promises about appeals. Chen touched Caleb's shoulder. You did good. He's still going to fight this. Of course he is. Men like that always do. But he'll do it from a jail cell. They left through a side exit to avoid the media. Outside, the sun was setting over Denver's skyline, painting the buildings in shades of orange and red. Caleb breathed in the cold air and felt something shift inside his chest. Not relief exactly. Not closure. But maybe the beginning of both. What happens now? He asked. Chen smiled. Now? Now we build the case. Gather witnesses. Prepare for trial. It's going to be a long fight. I'm not going anywhere. Good, because we're going to need you. They walked toward the parking garage in silence. Above them, the first stars were starting to appear. Somewhere in those mountains, Sarah's memory was finally getting the justice it deserved. And Caleb Hale was finally learning how to live with that. The trial started 8 months later on a Tuesday morning in March, when the snow had finally melted and the world looked like it might remember how to be green again. Caleb sat in the witness waiting room with Lena Cross and 3 other people who'd found the courage to testify. A former employee of Cade's hunting lodge who'd kept records of illegal kills. A forest ranger who'd been told to look the other way. A county clerk who'd processed land deals that didn't add up. All of them scared. All of them there, anyway. "You think it'll work?" Lena asked, staring at the courtroom doors. "All this testimony, all this evidence, you think it'll actually stick?" "It has to." "That's not an answer." Caleb looked at her. She'd changed in 8 months. Sharper somehow, less afraid. The kind of change that came from deciding you were done running. "No," he admitted. "It's not. But it's all we've got." The bailiff called his name first. He walked into a courtroom packed with spectators, journalists, and people who'd driven from Black Ridge just to watch Victor Cade finally face consequences. The jury sat in their box looking tired already. This was day 3 of opening arguments and preliminary testimony. Rodriguez stood at the prosecution table, organizing papers with the focused energy of someone who'd spent 8 months building toward this moment. Cade sat at the defense table looking thinner than Caleb remembered. 8 months in county jail had stripped away the polish. The expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. Hammond and his team flanked him like guards protecting something valuable. The judge, a different one this time, a man in his 70s named Carruthers, who'd seen 1,000 cases and believed in exactly none of them, gestured Caleb forward. The oath, the questions, the careful construction of timeline and motive. Rodriguez walked him through finding the tracks, following the trail, discovering the staging site. She introduced Sarah's journal as evidence, played portions of her voice memos, built the story of a woman who'd gotten too close to the truth. "And what happened to your wife, Mr. Hale?" "She was murdered. Her vehicle was tampered with to cause a fatal accident." "How do you know this?" "James Carver witnessed Deputy Wade working under her truck the night before she died. He documented the time, location, and vehicle description." "And Mr. Carver is deceased?" "Yes, but his written testimony is corroborated by cell phone records placing Wade at the scene." Hammond objected 3 times during the testimony. Each time, Carruthers overruled him with the weary patience of someone who knew exactly what game was being played. Then it was Hammond's turn. He approached slowly, carrying a folder thick with papers. "Mr. Hale, you've made some extraordinary claims about my client." "I've stated facts." "Facts, right." Hammond opened the folder. "Let's talk about facts." "Fact. Local law enforcement investigated your wife's death and found no evidence of foul play." "Fact. The vehicle was examined by certified mechanics who found no tampering." "Fact. The accident reconstruction team concluded driver error on icy roads." These are facts, yes? "Facts presented by people who had reason to cover up the truth, or facts presented by professionals doing their jobs. Which is more likely, Mr. Hale? A vast conspiracy involving dozens of people across multiple agencies, or a tragic accident? The conspiracy is documented. By you, a man with admitted bias. By the FBI. Federal agents who've spent 3 years building this case." Hammond smiled. "Ah, yes, the FBI. Tell me, Mr. Hale, when did you first contact them?" "My wife was working with Agent Chen before she died." "Before she died? And after? When did you personally reach out?" "After I found her files." "Which was when?" 3 years after her death." 3 years, during which time you lived alone in the mountains, isolated from society, consumed by grief and anger. Would you say your mental state during that period was stable?" Rodriguez stood. "Objection, relevance." "Your Honor, the witness's credibility is absolutely relevant. I'll allow it, but get to the point, Mr. Hammond." Hammond turned back to Caleb. "Did you seek professional help for your grief?" "No." "Why not?" "I was focused on finding the truth." "Or you were descending into paranoid obsession. Tell me, during those 3 years, did you have conversations with your deceased wife?" The question landed like a punch. Caleb kept his voice steady. I talked to her. Yes. You talked to a dead woman. I talked to her memory. People do that when they're grieving. And did she talk back? Of course not. Are you certain? Because the line between talking to a memory and hearing voices can be quite thin when someone's under extreme psychological stress. Objection! Rodriguez was on her feet. Counsel is not a psychiatrist. Withdrawn. Hammond flipped a page. Mr. Hale, you owned firearms during this period of isolation, correct? Yes. How many? 3. Rifle, shotgun, handgun. And did you ever consider using one of those firearms to harm yourself? Caleb's hands tightened on the witness box rail. No. Never? Not once during 3 years of isolation and grief? Never. That's interesting, because according to medical records from County General, you were treated for a self-inflicted injury in February 2022. Caleb's throat went dry. He'd forgotten about that. A night when the grief got too heavy and he'd punched a wall hard enough to break 2 knuckles. The clinic had asked questions he'd deflected. That was an accident. An accident that required surgery to repair nerve damage. An accident that happens when someone punches solid objects with full force. Hammond's voice softened, became almost sympathetic. Mr. Hale, I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm trying to establish that you were not in a sound mental state when you began this investigation. That your judgment was compromised by trauma. My judgment was fine. Was it? Or were you desperate to find meaning in a meaningless tragedy? So desperate that you built an entire conspiracy theory around random coincidences and circumstantial evidence? The evidence isn't circumstantial. No? Let's examine it. You found tracks on your property, in hunting season, in a county where thousands of people hunt legally. You found butchered animals. Again, in hunting season. You found a staging site that could belong to any number of legitimate operations. Where's the conspiracy? The symbol. The same mark was found at Sarah's crash site and at the illegal kill sites. A symbol you claim to have seen. No photographs of it at the crash site exist in any official record. Because the scene was cleared before I could document it. Or because it never existed. Because you saw what you wanted to see and built everything else around that initial delusion. Caleb felt his control slipping. I'm not delusional. Then explain to the jury why it took 3 years for the FBI to act if the evidence was so compelling. Explain why local law enforcement found nothing. Explain why everyone except you seems to think your wife's death was accidental. Because they were paid to think that. By my client, who you claim runs a vast criminal empire despite having no criminal record, no history of violence, and a reputation built over 30 years of legitimate business. Reputations can be bought. As contestimony, Mr. Hale, how much is the FBI paying you to testify? Nothing. Nothing? Not even witness protection? Relocation assistance? Compensation for your time? They offered. I refused. How noble, or how convenient. Because if you were being paid, it would undermine your credibility even further. Rodriguez was objecting again, but Caleb barely heard it. The courtroom felt too small, too hot. Hammond was doing exactly what he'd been warned about, picking apart every weakness, every doubt, every moment of human fragility. The judge called a recess. Caleb stumbled out of the witness box and into the hallway where Chen was waiting. That was rough, she said. He made me sound crazy. He made you sound human. There's a difference. Chen guided him toward the witness room. Juries understand grief. They understand trauma. What Hammond's trying to do is make them doubt the evidence by discrediting you. But we've got more than your testimony. Do we? Because it feels like we've got financial records, we've got Wade's confession, we've got the staging site, we've got Lena's documentation. We've got 12 other witnesses who place Cade at the center of this operation. Chen's voice was firm. One bad cross-examination doesn't destroy a case. You did fine. Caleb wasn't sure he believed her. The trial continued for 6 more weeks. Lena testified about the kill sites, her voice steady even when Hammond tried to shake her. The former lodge employee testified about client lists and illegal permits. The forest ranger testified about being told to falsify reports. And Deputy Marcus Wade, looking 20 years older than he had 8 months ago, testified about tampering with Sarah's vehicle under orders from Sheriff Davis, who'd been working for Cade for the past 5 years. He told me it was just a warning, Wade said, voice barely above a whisper. Scare her off the story. I didn't know they were planning to... Planning to what? Rodriguez asked. To make sure the brake failure happened on Highway 14, on that specific curve where she couldn't survive it. The courtroom went silent. Hammond objected, called it hearsay, demanded it be stricken from the record. Carruthers denied the motion. Sheriff Davis testified next, trying to save himself by throwing everyone else under the bus. Cade had corrupted him. Cade had ordered the hit. Cade had orchestrated everything. Cade's lawyers tore him apart on cross-examination, but the damage was done. The prosecution rested after 5 weeks. Cade's defense took 2 days. Character witnesses who swore he was a pillar of the community. Business partners who testified to his integrity. His lawyers built a case that he was being framed by corrupt local officials trying to save themselves. Then Cade himself took the stand. He wore a different suit this time. More humble. Less expensive. The lawyers had coached him well. I'm a businessman, he said, voice measured and calm. I run legitimate operations. If people were using my property for illegal activities, I had no knowledge of it. You're saying your employees acted without your knowledge? His lawyer asked. Unfortunately, yes. I trusted the wrong people. Sheriff Davis assured me he was keeping the county safe. I had no reason to doubt him. And Sarah Hale? I never met her, never spoke to her. Her death was tragic, but I had nothing to do with it. What about the allegations that you threatened her husband? Mr. Hale is grieving, I understand that. But I never threatened anyone. I offered to help him move past his loss. He interpreted that as something sinister. It was smooth, practiced, almost believable. Then Rodriguez stood for cross-examination. Mr. Cade, you claim you had no knowledge of illegal activities on your property. That's correct. Yet you own the land through shell companies specifically designed to obscure ownership. Why? Tax purposes, perfectly legal. And the hunting lodge client lists that include known poachers and convicted wildlife criminals? I don't personally vet every client. That's what staff is for. Staff you hired, staff you paid, staff who operated under your direction. Staff who apparently betrayed my trust. Rodriguez pulled out a document. This is an email from you to Sheriff Davis dated November 10th, 2020. You discuss handling the documentary problem and making sure certain stories don't get told. What did you mean by that? Cade's expression didn't change. I was referring to a separate matter, a land development issue. On the same date your wife was investigating your hunting operation? Coincidence. Interesting coincidence. Here's another email dated November 14th. You write, if she won't back off, we'll need to consider permanent solutions. What did you mean by permanent solutions? Legal action, cease and desist orders. Not murder? Absolutely not. Rodriguez introduced 20 more emails over the next hour, each one damning, each one explained away by Cade's lawyers as misunderstood or taken out of context. But the cumulative weight was crushing. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Caleb spent those days in the motel room Chen had rented, staring at the TV without really watching it, eating food he didn't taste, existing in a strange limbo between hope and resignation. On the 3rd day, his phone rang. They've reached a verdict, Chen said. Court convenes in 1 hour. The courtroom was packed again. Every seat filled. Reporters standing in the back, the air thick with anticipation. Cade sat at the defense table looking smaller than ever. His lawyers flanked him, but their confident expressions had cracked. The jury filed in. 12 faces that gave away nothing. Judge Carruthers looked at the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of illegal wildlife trafficking? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? The foreman paused. The silence stretched. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Cade's face went white. His lawyers immediately started filing motions. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. But Caleb barely heard any of it. He just sat there, letting the word wash over him. Guilty. 3 years of grief. 3 years of fighting. 3 years of people telling him he was wrong, he was crazy, he needed to let it go. And he'd been right. Chen grabbed his arm. We did it. Yeah, we did. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Cade stood before the judge looking like he'd aged a decade. His lawyers made their arguments for leniency. First offense: pillar of the community, charitable work. Carruthers listened with the same weary patience he'd shown throughout the trial. Then he spoke. Mr. Cade, you used your wealth and influence to corrupt law enforcement, endanger wildlife, and orchestrate the murder of a woman whose only crime was pursuing the truth. You showed no remorse, no accountability. Even now, you maintain your innocence despite overwhelming evidence. The law provides for maximum sentences in cases of this severity, and I intend to impose them. He sentenced Cade to 40 years on the conspiracy charge alone, added another 20 for racketeering, 10 for wildlife crimes. 70 years total. Cade would die in prison. Sheriff Davis got 25 years, Deputy Wade got 15 with possibility of parole. A dozen others in the network received sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years. The entire operation collapsed like a house built on sand. Caleb watched from the gallery as they led Cade away in handcuffs. For just a moment, their eyes met. Cade's expression held no defiance now, just the hollow understanding that this was how his story ended. Caleb felt nothing, no satisfaction, no triumph, just emptiness where the anger used to be. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions. How do you feel about the verdict? Are you satisfied with the sentence? What's next for you? Chen ran interference while Caleb pushed through to the car, but one reporter managed to get close enough to ask the question that mattered. Do you think Sarah would be proud? Caleb stopped, turned, looked at the young woman holding the microphone with genuine curiosity in her eyes. I think, he said slowly, Sarah would be relieved it's finally over, and maybe a little sad it took this long. Will you go back to Blackridge? Yeah, I will. Why? After everything that happened there? Caleb thought about the cabin, the mountain, the 3 years of isolation. Because it's still my home, and maybe it's time I actually tried living there instead of just hiding. The reporter seemed satisfied with that. Caleb climbed into Chen's car and they drove away from the courthouse, away from the crowds, away from the cameras and questions and the weight of public scrutiny. You really going back? Chen asked. Don't see why not. That town tried to bury you. Some people in that town tried to bury me. Others tried to help. Lena, Father Weaver, even the clerk at the Gazette who gave me access to the archives. Can't blame the whole place for what a few corrupt officials did. Chen was quiet for a moment. What will you do there? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Haven't thought that far ahead. You could work with us. The Bureau could use someone with your skills, someone who knows how to track, how to investigate, how to not give up when things get hard. I appreciate that. But I think I'm done with law enforcement. Then what? Caleb looked out the window at Denver sliding past. Sarah wanted to start a wildlife sanctuary before she got into documentary work. Thought maybe I could do that. Use the land I've got. Make it into something that matters. That's a good plan. Maybe. We'll see. They drove in silence for a while. Then Chen said, For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't give up. When we first talked, I honestly thought you were just another grieving spouse chasing conspiracy theories. I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong. I was pretty close to the edge there for a while. But you pulled back. Had to. Sarah would have kicked my ass if I went off the deep end completely. Chen smiled. She sounds like she was something special. She was. Caleb spent one more night in the Denver motel, then drove back to Blackridge the next morning. The town looked different in May sunshine. Flowers blooming in window boxes, kids playing in yards. Life continuing on like the past year's revelations had been an interruption rather than a revelation. Maybe that's all they were for most people. An interruption. A moment of scandal before everything went back to normal. But normal had changed. The hunting lodge was shuttered now, yellow police tape across the doors. Cade's other properties in the county had been seized by the federal government. The sheriff's office had been cleaned out. New sheriff, new deputies, none of them compromised. Main Street still had the same diner, the same feed store, the same hardware shop where the sniper had set up during the ambush. Caleb drove past all of it and headed up the mountain to his cabin. It looked exactly as he'd left it 8 months ago. Dust on every surface, mail piled by the door. the silence of a place that had been waiting. He spent the day cleaning, opening windows, airing out the grief that had soaked into the walls. That evening, he hiked up to the old hunting blind where he'd found Sarah's evidence. The structure had finally collapsed under winter snow, just boards and canvas scattered across the ridge. He gathered what could be salvaged and burned the rest in a small fire as the sun set. "I kept my promise," he said to the empty forest. "Took longer than it should have. Made some mistakes along the way, but I kept it." The wind moved through the pines with a sound like breathing. "I'm not sure what I do now. The fight's over. The bad guys lost. You got justice, but I still don't know how to be the person I was before I lost you." Silence. Maybe I'm not supposed to be that person anymore. Maybe this is who I am now. Someone who knows the world can be cruel and random and unfair, but also knows it's worth fighting for anyway. He watched the fire burn down to embers. "I'm going to build something here. Make this place into what you wanted. A sanctuary. Somewhere the mountain can just be the mountain without people tearing it apart for profit." The last ember flickered and died. "I miss you. Every day. But I'm learning to live with that. Learning that missing someone doesn't mean you can't move forward." He stood and scattered the ashes. Then he walked back down the mountain as stars began appearing overhead. The next morning, Caleb started making calls. Wildlife conservation organizations, environmental groups, legal experts who could help him navigate the process of turning his land into a protected sanctuary. It took 6 months of paperwork, meetings, and bureaucratic nonsense. But by November, 3 years to the day after Sarah's death, the Black Ridge Hollow Wildlife Sanctuary officially opened. 40 acres of protected land where hunting was forbidden, development was prohibited, and the mountain could exist on its own terms. Lena Cross came to the dedication ceremony. So did Agent Chen, Father Weaver. Even some people from town who'd never quite believed the official story about Sarah's accident but hadn't known what to do about it. Caleb gave a short speech about Sarah's vision and the importance of protecting wild places. Then he cut the ribbon and opened the trails. People walked through the forest Sarah had loved, seeing it through her eyes. Some of them stopped to read the plaques Caleb had installed at various points. Quotes from her documentary work about the value of wilderness. At the highest point of the sanctuary, overlooking the valley where everything had started, Caleb had placed a stone memorial. Sarah Hale, 1985 to 2020. She sought truth in a world of silence. She found it, and she made it matter. He stood there as the dedication wound down and people started heading back to their cars. Lena found him on the ridge. "You did good," she said. This is exactly what she would have wanted. "Yeah, I think so. What's next? You gonna run this place yourself?" "For now. Eventually I'll bring in proper rangers, ecologists, people who know what they're doing, but for now, it's just me and the mountain." "Sounds lonely." "Maybe. But it's a different kind of lonely than before. The kind where you're alone by choice instead of hiding." Lena nodded. "I'm heading back to school, finishing my thesis, using the documentation from this whole mess as part of my research." "Good. Someone should get something useful out of it." "Already did. This whole experience taught me something important." "What's that?" "That silence is a choice. And so is speaking up. I chose silence for too long and it nearly cost me everything, not making that mistake again." They stood together watching the sun track across the sky. "You know what Sarah would say if she could see you now?" Lena asked. "What?" "She'd say you look like you finally figured out how to breathe again." Caleb thought about that. Maybe she was right. The grief was still there. Probably always would be. But it had changed shape, become something he could carry instead of something that carried him. He'd learned that justice didn't erase loss, that punishment didn't bring back the dead, that all the courtroom victories in the world couldn't change the fundamental unfairness of losing someone you loved. But he'd also learned that silence was complicity, that looking away made you part of the problem, that sometimes the only way to honor someone's memory was to finish what they started, even when it cost you everything. The sanctuary wouldn't bring Sarah back, but it would protect the things she'd cared about, and maybe that was enough. As the sun set over Black Ridge Hollow, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Caleb Hale stood on the ridge and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, not the erasure of memory. just the quiet understanding that he'd kept his promise, that he'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to him and transformed it into something meaningful. The mountain breathed around him, alive and wild and free. And for the first time since Sarah died, Caleb breathed with it. Not hiding, not surviving, living. The world had tried to take everything from him, had succeeded in many ways. But standing there on the ridge, watching wildlife move through protected forest, knowing that corruption had faced consequences and silence had been broken, he realized something important. They'd taken his wife, his peace, his old life. But they hadn't taken his ability to choose what came next. And he chose this. He chose to build instead of destroy, to protect instead of take, to honor memory by creating something that lasted. Somewhere in the valley below, an elk bugled. The sound echoed off the granite cliffs and rolled across the wilderness like a promise. The mountain would remember, not the violence, not the corruption, not the men who'd tried to own what couldn't be owned. It would remember the woman who'd fought to protect it, and the man who'd loved her enough to finish the fight. Caleb turned and walked back down the trail toward his cabin, leaving footprints in the soft earth that the wind would eventually erase. But the sanctuary would remain. Sarah's legacy made real, and that, finally, was enough.